I've mentioned this a few times, but it's worth noting one last time how much Frankenstein and Dracula are connected to each other in movies. Usually a movie studio will make a movie based on one, and based on its success, they'll make the other. Universal's Dracula led to them making Frankenstein. Hammer's Frankenstein led them to making Dracula. The success of Blackula led to someone else swooping in and shitting out Blackenstein. Andy Warhol's mess of a Frankenstein movie led to him also making a Dracula movie. Well, in 1992, Francis Ford Coppola made one of my favorite movies, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was a huge success both critically and commercially. So, it seems only natural that Coppola would follow up with a Frankenstein film, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. However, things worked out a bit differently. Coppola didn't direct the film, he instead only produced it, leaving Kenneth Branagh to direct, who also starred as Frankenstein. Interestingly, the screenplay was partially written by Frank Darabont, who had directed some of my favorite movies. So there you have not one, but two of my favorite directors not directing this film, but working on it in a different way. Oh, and Fred Fuchs executive produced it, so enjoy once again laughing uncontrollably when his name shows up in the credits. Anyway, like Dracula, there's once again a star-studded cast. You have Branagh as Frankenstein, Robert De Niro plays the creature, Helena Bonham Carter plays Elizabeth, and there's other names floating around such as Aidan Quinn, Ian Holm, John Cleese, and Richard Briers, whom I only mention because when I saw his character, I thought it was actually Ian Holm doing a dual role. Anyway, like Dracula, the plot was more or less follows the book pretty faithfully, but adds a lot of little touches here and there that were taken from various past productions of Frankenstein. In a lot of ways, the movie itself is like one of Frankenstein's creations. It seems made up of the novel, the Universal pictures, the Hammer pictures, and of course the individual visions of the director and actors. Unlike Dracula, the movie got panned on its release. People said it was overblown and pretentious, and that it paled in comparison to Dracula. I was 15 when I saw it, and I remember thinking that, yeah, it's a little overblown, but I liked it anyway. I hadn't seen it since then, so when I watched it in preparation for this review, I was pretty curious to what I'd think about it nearly 15 years later. So let's take a look at the plot. The movie begins as an explorer, Captain Walton, is attempting to reach the North Pole. His ship is stuck on ice in the Arctic Circle, and his crew are freaking out at phantom noises. He meets a ragged man who introduces himself as Frankenstein and wants the sailors' help in hunting the creature. Captain Walton demands to know what is going on, so Frankenstein tells him his story, which brings us to the flashback portion of the movie. In it, Frankenstein is an ambitious young student whom his girlfriend has to drag him out of his laboratory to have fun. He runs off to college and is disappointed to learn that no theoretical science or research is being conducted. Instead, medical students are taught simply to learn the already known facts and subjugate their ambitions to the needs of patients. He's already obsessed with reversing death, as his mother had died giving birth to him, and he never knew her, and he's grown up with feelings of guilt due to this. His questions and theories about reanimating dead tissue make him unpopular at the school, but soon he's approached by Professor Kremp, who has apparently gone down this route before, having even created a creature which he said was an abomination and had to be destroyed. He mentors Frankenstein, but refuses to let him read his notes. He wants the student to avoid the mistakes that he made. However, Kremp is murdered by a lunatic trying to avoid a mandatory smallpox vaccine, and Frankenstein gets at the notes and realizes that everything he dreams is possible. He makes the creature using body parts from the murderer and other cadavers he finds or works on, and he uses Kremp's brain. He animates the creature, but perhaps due to getting banged on the head during the experiment, it is not the super-intelligent Ubermensch he was hoping for. He leaves the creature to die and vows to destroy his journal. I always thought this part was a little stupid. He writes about his experiment in the journal, including how he has to destroy the journal. So why write in it? Just throw the damn thing in a fire. Anyway, the creature is not dead, and it shuffles off with his creator's overcoat, which includes the journal. He wanders into town looking for food, but people flip out at the sight of him, thinking that he's somehow responsible for the recent outbreak of cholera. That's right, disease is caused by ugly people. I fully believe that people thought this. People were fucking stupid back then. Anyway, the creature winds up living in the barn on this farm, where he observes the family that lives there, including the farmer and his wife, kids, and his blind old father. The blind grandpa clearly knows that someone is secretly living there, but he never says anything. The creature relearns how to speak and think from watching the farmers' children's educations. He helps them by secretly plowing their frozen fields. When an angry landlord shows up and roughs up the grandfather, the creature beats him up and scares him off. The old man invites the creature inside, saying he's glad that his friend has finally revealed himself. However, he's driven off by the rest of the family, who only hear their daughter yelling, "He's hurting Grandpa!" Of course, meaning the landlord, but they come in and just beat up the first person they see. The creature reads the journal and learns about Frankenstein and vows revenge for his cursed creation. Meanwhile, Frankenstein has seemingly left his old life behind and is getting ready to get married. The creature is looking for him and instead finds and kills his little brother William. William's caretaker Justine is blamed for the murder and hanged by a lynch mob, despite Frankenstein and his family attempting to save her. The creature confronts his creator and asks him to make a bride. Frankenstein initially agrees, but balks at the idea when the creature brings him Justine's body to use as materials. The creature is enraged and vows to kill Elizabeth if he does not get what he wants. To put it in his own words, he says that he's full of both love and hatred, and that if he can't satisfy one, he will indulge the other. He murders Elizabeth, and Frankenstein makes the bride as a composite of her and Justine, but he's gone mad with grief and attempts to take the bride for himself. She kills herself, and then we go back to the Arctic Circle. After telling his tale, Frankenstein dies of exhaustion. The creature shows up, and they have a funeral for Frankenstein. The creature, despite being hunted by his creator, is saddened, as this was his father who died. The ice breaks up during the funeral, separating Frankenstein's body on an ice floe, and while Captain Walton wants the creature to come with him, the creature says he's done with men and swims to the ice floe, where he burns the body and himself. Walton realizes that Frankenstein told him the story for a reason. He saw himself in Walton, as Walton's obsession with reaching the North Pole is ruining his own life, and he's disregarding the danger to himself and his men. Learning from the experience, he wisely decides to head home. Overall, I think the issues with the film come at the beginning and at the end. In the beginning, the entire thing comes off as silly, with Frankenstein building a lightning rod because he saw a cloud and the overblown experiment. And the end is marred by the bride's death scene, which involves her breaking a kerosene lamp over her head and then running out a window while on fire. That's fine, but somehow there's all sorts of explosions happening around her and beside her and behind her as she runs toward the camera in slow motion. It looks like somebody parodying a Michael Bay film with explosions going off for no reason. The criticisms against the film for being pretentious and overblown are well-founded, but I came away liking it anyway, because the quieter middle parts are so good, mostly due to the excellent performance of Robert De Niro as the creature. He's right up there with David Prowse for the best Frankenstein creation. Interestingly enough, he's never referred to in the movie as a monster or the creature, with Branagh even banning the words on the set. In the credits, he's simply called the sharp-featured man. The makeup effects are excellent. I especially liked how his surgical seams eventually heal, and he becomes less gruesome due to this as the movie progresses. His quiet, subtle performance belies the movie's bombastic nature and works as a counterbalance, turning a film away from a mess and towards being watchable. Like Bram Stoker's Dracula, the movie does stray from the plot of the book, but not from its theme, as it centers around dangerous obsession and how it can ruin a man's life and make everyone around him miserable. My favorite scene is when the creature scolds Frankenstein for creating him, asking him if he knew or even considered the consequences of his actions. He questions whether or not he was made up of good people or bad people. Frankenstein claims they were nothing more than raw materials, and he's proven wrong pretty quickly, as the creature knows how to play a flute, and he questions which part of him knew how to play it. Helena Bonham Carter is also good as Elizabeth and the bride, and the film is put together very well. So I could more or less forgive the parts that are over the top. It's not nearly as good as Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it's not as bad as you've heard it is. I'll give Mary Shelley's Frankenstein a 7 out of a possible 10. And with that, that will be the end of the 10 Days of Frankenstein feature. Hope you enjoyed it and have a happy fucking Halloween and all that shit. Can you believe I already have 10 movies picked out for next year? Not like I'm telling you what they are, but you'll be in for a treat as usual. See you next year.